I remember the day vividly. It was a sunny afternoon when I finally got to leave the hospital with Oliver, my newborn son. The air outside felt fresh, a stark contrast to the sterile environment I'd been confined to for months. My name's Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 28 and just became a mom. It wasn't an easy journey, with half my pregnancy spent in a hospital room, clinging onto hope and life. As we drove home, I looked at Oliver, sleeping peacefully in his car seat. My heart swelled with love and relief. He was healthy, a miracle after everything we'd been through. I couldn't wait for Daniel, my husband, to see us. I imagined a warm welcome, maybe even a little celebration. But reality hit hard when we pulled into the driveway. Daniel's car was there, but so were a few empty beer bottles strewn on the lawn. My stomach knotted. He'd taken time off to celebrate the birth of his son, but this wasn't what I expected. I hesitated at the door, holding Oliver close. "It's okay, Ellie," I told myself. "Maybe he's just excited." The door swung open, and there was Daniel, leaning against the frame, a half-empty bottle in his hand. His eyes, usually so warm, now seemed distant, glazed over. "Hey, Ellie, you're back," he slurred, barely glancing at Oliver. "Daniel, I thought we could, I don't know, celebrate together?" I tried to sound upbeat, but my voice shook. He looked at me then, really looked, and his face twisted into a sneer. "Celebrate. Look at you, Ellie. You've become a cow." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, stunned, as he chuckled and repeated, "A cow, Ellie. That's what you are." I felt the tears welling up, but I fought them back. "Daniel, you're drunk. You don't mean that." But he just shrugged, still smirking. "Truth hurts, doesn't it? Go put the baby away and clean yourself up. You're a mess." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Holding Oliver tighter, I walked past Daniel and headed straight to our bedroom. The walls of the home we'd built together suddenly felt cold, unwelcoming. I put Oliver in his crib, his tiny hands curling around my finger. Looking at him, I felt a wave of love, but also a crushing sense of despair. That night, as I lay awake listening to Daniel's snores, I told myself it was just the alcohol talking. He'd be better in the morning, I hoped. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, the haven I thought I'd returned to was shattered beyond repair. Morning came with a ray of hope. Maybe Daniel's hurtful words were just a result of his drunken state. I wanted to believe that. As Oliver cooed in his crib, I made up my mind to start the day anew, leaving the bitterness of last night behind. I heard Daniel in the kitchen. The clinking of dishes and the smell of coffee gave me a sense of normalcy. "Good morning," I said softly as I entered, Oliver cradled in my arms. Daniel was sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up, and for a second, I saw the man I married. But then his eyes narrowed, and the hope I clung to started to crumble. "Morning," he muttered, his voice devoid of warmth. I took a deep breath. "Daniel, about last night, I know you were drunk, but what you said really hurt me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Ellie, I wasn't that drunk. I knew what I was saying." His words felt like a slap. "So you meant it? You think I'm a cow?" I couldn't help the quiver in my voice. He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "Well, look at you. You've let yourself go. It's the truth." Tears stung my eyes, but I fought them back. "I just had a baby, Daniel. Our baby. My body went through a lot. And now it's over. Time to get back in shape, don't you think?" He didn't even look at me as he spoke. I was at a loss for words. This wasn't the man I knew, the one who promised to love and support me through thick and thin. "I thought you'd be happy to see Oliver," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel finally glanced at his son, a flicker of something passing over his face. "Yeah, he's fine. But you need to work on yourself, Ellie. I can't even look at you without feeling disgusted." I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. Holding Oliver close, I turned away, unable to bear the sight of Daniel's cold, judging eyes. In the safety of the nursery, I let the tears flow freely. It wasn't just about the weight. It was the realization that the man I loved, the father of my child, looked at me with nothing but disgust. As I nursed Oliver, trying to quiet his hungry cries, Daniel's words echoed in my head. Disgusted, he had said. That's how he saw me. The joy of motherhood was overshadowed by a deep, aching sadness. My home didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a house where I lived with a man who couldn't stand the sight of me. Days turned into weeks, and the cold distance between Daniel and me grew. The house felt like a battleground, with silent glares and unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. But through it all, Oliver was my beacon of light. His gurgles and smiles were what kept me going. One evening, as I was feeding Oliver, Daniel walked into the room. "Ellie, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat. I looked up, bracing myself. "What is it, Daniel?" He leaned against the door frame, not bothering to hide his discomfort. "I can't do this anymore. You and the baby, it's too much. I can't sleep with his crying, and you're just not the same." His words stung, but I kept my voice calm for Oliver's sake. "What are you saying, Daniel? I want you to move into the guest room, with Oliver. I need my space," he said, almost as if he was talking about rearranging furniture, not our lives. I felt a surge of anger, but I swallowed it. Arguing wouldn't change his mind. "Fine, if that's what you need," I replied, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. Daniel nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Good, and try to keep the baby quiet at night. I need my sleep." As he walked away, leaving me with those cold, dismissive words, I realized that this was my new reality. A husband who saw me as a nuisance and a home that felt more like a prison. But as I looked down at Oliver, his tiny hand wrapped around my finger, I knew I had to be strong for him. For the little boy who depended on me for everything. My own pain and heartache didn't matter. I had to be a mother first, putting my son's needs above my own. That night, as I lay in the guest room, Oliver sleeping peacefully beside me, I made a promise to myself. I would endure Daniel's disdain, his cruel words, and his indifference. I would bear it all for the sake of my son. Because in the end, that's what mothers do. We sacrifice our own happiness for the ones we love. And for Oliver, I was willing to make that sacrifice, no matter how much it hurt. Life in the guest room had become a quiet routine. Daniel and I barely spoke, our interactions limited to terse exchanges about Oliver's care. The house felt more like a silent battlefield than a home. Yet, amid this chilly detachment, I found a quiet rebellion growing within me. Each day, I took Oliver out for long walks, seeking solace in the rhythm of my steps and his contented coos. I noticed small changes in myself. My face seemed a bit slimmer in the mirror, my clothes looser. It wasn't just a physical transformation. Something inside me was shifting too. I started doing push-ups and jumping rope during Oliver's naps. I didn't mention it to Daniel. This was my silent rebellion, a way of regaining some control in my life. Despite the changes in me, Daniel remained oblivious. He never commented on my weight loss. Instead, he focused on how much I ate. On weekends, when he got drunk, he would revert to his cruel jabs. "Look at you, eating like a cow," he'd slur, mocking me even as I tried to ignore him. The worst was when I breastfed Oliver. Daniel would moo mockingly, repeating the word cow with a sneer. Each time, it felt like a knife twisting in my heart, but I swallowed the hurt, focusing solely on my son's needs. That period was a mix of pain and determination for me. Pain from Daniel's relentless insults and determination to continue my silent rebellion. It wasn't about him anymore. This journey was for me, about reclaiming my self-worth and strength. Each night, as I lay in bed, I realized that I was walking a path of transformation. I didn't know where it would lead, but I was determined to follow it. For Oliver, for myself. No matter what Daniel said or did, he couldn't take away the progress I was making, step by step, day by day. A whole year had flown by since Oliver was born. During this time, I had quietly changed. My daily walks and exercises had become a sanctuary. In the mirror, a new version of me stared back, a version I was beginning to respect and love. Daniel's attitude, however, remained unchanged. His hurtful remarks continued, but their impact on me had lessened. I had built a fortress around my heart, focusing solely on my son and my well-being. One afternoon, as I fed Oliver, Daniel sauntered in. "Still on your health mission?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Yes," I replied calmly. "It's important for me and Oliver." He scoffed and left the room. I sighed, knowing his support was something I could no longer hope for. As Oliver's first birthday neared, I decided to throw a small celebration. I invited our parents, eager to mark this special day. It was also time for me to reveal the extent of my transformation. I chose a beautiful evening dress for the occasion, a stark contrast to the loose clothing I had been hiding in. When the day arrived, the reactions to my new appearance were heartwarming. My parents were overjoyed, tears glistening in their eyes. "You look incredible, Ellie," my mom said softly. Daniel's parents were equally astonished. "Ellie, you've changed so much," his mother exclaimed. Even Daniel seemed taken aback. His eyes widened as he stammered, "Ellie, you look really good." I thanked them, feeling a surge of pride. This journey was mine, and I'd come so far. The party was a joyous affair, with Oliver basking in the love and attention. As the evening wound down and Oliver drifted to sleep, I gathered our guests. "I have a surprise for everyone," I announced, my heart pounding. "Please, don't leave just yet." Curious, they stayed. I took a deep breath and pulled out a small dictaphone. "This," I said, "is something I need to share." With that, I pressed play. As the dictaphone played, the room filled with Daniel's harsh words. Each cow and pig echoed painfully. His mocking laughter at my post-pregnancy body, the way he mooed when I breastfed Oliver, it was all there. My parents' faces turned to shock, their eyes widening with every insult they heard. Daniel's parents, too, seemed appalled, their expressions a mix of disbelief and sadness. Daniel stood frozen, his face pale. As the recording played, his eyes darted around, looking for an escape that wasn't there. When it ended, there was a heavy silence. I turned off the dictaphone and looked around. My mom was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "Ellie, how could you bear this?" I shrugged, a sense of emptiness in my voice. "For Oliver. I had to stay strong for our son." Daniel's mom was crying. "Daniel, how could you do this to Ellie?" Daniel stuttered. "Mom, I didn't mean it. It was just..." "Just what, Daniel?" his dad interrupted, anger in his voice. "Just fun? Just words?" I could see Daniel struggling to find words, his usual arrogance gone. His dad stood up, his jaw set firmly. "We raised you better than this, Daniel. We taught you to respect and love, not to hurt and belittle." The room felt heavy with disappointment and sorrow. Daniel looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Ellie, I'm sorry. I didn't realize..." I cut him off. "Sorry doesn't erase the pain, Daniel. It doesn't change what you did." There was more I wanted to say, more I needed to reveal. I took out my phone and opened the photo gallery. "There's something else," I said, my voice steady. I turned the screen towards them. The photos of Daniel with another woman were clear, their intimacy undeniable. The gasps were audible. My mom covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Daniel's dad stood up, his face red with anger. "You cheated on her, on top of everything else?" Daniel was lost for words, his face a mask of guilt. I looked at him, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "I have decided to file for divorce, Daniel. I can't live like this anymore." Daniel reached out, but I stepped back. "Please, Ellie. I can change. It's too late for that," I said firmly. "I'm doing this for me and for Oliver. We deserve better." The room was filled with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief. But amidst all that, I felt a sense of relief. The truth was out, and I was ready to move forward, away from the pain and towards a new beginning. In the aftermath of the birthday party, my life felt like it had been upended. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. My decision to divorce Daniel had been met with a mix of support and concern from our families. My mom was the first to speak to me the next day. "Ellie, are you sure about this? Divorce is a big step." I nodded, feeling resolute. "Yes, Mom. I can't let Oliver grow up thinking it's okay to treat people like that." She hugged me, her embrace warm and reassuring. "We're here for you, always." Daniel's parents called me too. His mom's voice was thick with tears. "Ellie, we're so sorry. We never knew." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "But I need to do what's best for me and Oliver." Daniel had been trying to reach me, leaving messages and texts. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. A few days later, I met with a lawyer to start the divorce process. She was sympathetic but professional. "You have a strong case, especially with the evidence of emotional abuse and adultery." "I just want it to be over," I admitted. "I want to start fresh." "I'll do everything I can to make it as smooth as possible," she promised. At home, I started packing Daniel's things. It felt surreal, like I was erasing a part of my life. But it also felt necessary, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. Daniel came over to collect his things. He looked defeated, his usual bravado gone. "Ellie, can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head. "There's nothing left to say, Daniel. You need to leave." He glanced around at the home we had built together. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I really am." I looked at him, my heart hard. "Sorry doesn't change what you did. It's too late." He nodded, accepting defeat. He picked up his boxes and left, closing the door behind him. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. A chapter of my life was closing, but a new one was beginning. A chapter where I was in control, where I could build a better future for myself and Oliver. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was a strange feeling, seeing my marriage reduced to a few papers. But it was also liberating. I was officially free from Daniel's abuse, free to start anew. I moved into a smaller apartment with Oliver. It was cozy, filled with laughter and love. I decorated it with bright colors and framed photos of me and Oliver, our new haven. Mom visited often. One day, she brought a cake to celebrate. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes shining with pride. I smiled, cutting a slice for each of us. To new beginnings. As Oliver grew, I made sure he knew he was loved. We spent our days exploring parks, reading books, and playing games. He was a happy, curious child, and my heart swelled with love for him. One afternoon, as we played in the park, a woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Ellie?" I nodded, curious. "Yes, I am." She smiled warmly. "I read your story on Reddit. It inspired me to leave my abusive relationship. Thank you." I was taken aback, touched by her words. "I'm glad my story could help. How are you doing now?" "Much better," she said. "It's been hard, but I'm rebuilding my life." We chatted for a while, sharing our experiences and offering each other support. It was a reminder of how powerful our stories could be, how they could reach and help others. Life wasn't always easy. There were challenges and tough days, but I faced them with a strength I never knew I had. I was no longer the woman who came home from the hospital to a drunken, abusive husband. I was a survivor, a mother, and a beacon of hope for others. I started writing more, sharing my journey on Reddit and other platforms. The responses were overwhelming. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their stories and thanking me for my honesty. One evening, as I put Oliver to bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, you're my hero." My heart melted. "And you're mine, Oliver. Always." After he fell asleep, I sat by his bed, watching him breathe softly. I thought about our journey, the pain and the triumphs. We had come so far. I whispered into the quiet room, "We made it, Oliver. We made it." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what life threw at us, we would face it together, with love and resilience echoing in our hearts.